For anyone who is just finding me, I'm telling the story of how I left my job of 14 years unexpectedly without a plan, retrained as a hairdresser, opened my own business. The business survived COVID, during which time I began the process of applying for citizenship of another country and retrained as a web and brand designer. I returned to work. I also created a new business, and now I am working on moving to Italy. We are at part 8. In part 7, I had just moved to a new studio with my hair business. It was the first time I had signed a lease. I had been subletting until that point, and it's a little bit catastrophic. I had moved partly because I felt like the arrangement I had at the sublet was expiring, let's say. And also, I felt confident to make the move because my phone was ringing off the hook at this point. I had so much work, and I thought this is the perfect time to move. At the end of the last part of the story, I explained that in the process of making the move, which was already not going as smoothly as one would hope, I discovered that Yelp had just completely gotten rid of my business listing. They had marked me as permanently closed after I changed my address to the new location, and the result of which had been that my phone went dead. I had no more phone calls coming in. And this is sort of my worst nightmare realized, that I am back in the position almost that I was in when I first opened the business and was really struggling to get new clients. Except now I have signed a lease and I am responsible for maintaining my side of that deal. So it gets kind of dull from here for a few years. What happened is that I did manage to get Yelp to restore the reviews that I had. I spoke with a lot of people there. Yelp does not have customer service representatives at all. They only have ad sales people in terms of who is willing to speak to anyone in the public. So it was really tricky, but finally someone understood. What they kept on trying to tell me is that they consider the location part of the experience that the business offers. And I was like, listen, the whole experience is me. Like, I'm providing services. I'm the only one. If the location is such a big part of the experience, then so would a staff be. And staff turns over regularly at any business. And you don't just wipe out all of their reviews because the same person isn't working there anymore. So I finally convinced someone, and they managed, I don't know how, because they said it was impossible, but they managed to restore all of my reviews and all of the photographs that people had uploaded to the page. And that helped somewhat, but I never, ever got back to having the volume of inquiries that I had when my Yelp page initially was peaking. So now for the next, let's see, 2016-ish till 2019 is pretty steady. I'm doing okay. I'm not doing as well as I was that one year where my business exploded, but it gets back to doing okay after a few months of being really, really dead and scary. And year over year, I'm growing a little bit every year, which is really, really good. And things are fine. Nothing too exciting, nothing too catastrophic. That's great. And I finally kind of get to a point where I feel comfortable with the fluctuations in business seasonally, and I start to feel comfortable, spending a little bit of money on myself, doing things like taking a class here or there, or buying a ticket to a show and trying to reincorporate an actual life into my life. And by the beginning of 2020, I have planned to go on my first vacation since quitting my job, really. This is the first time I've gone on a vacation since quitting my job. It's also only the second international vacation where I leave town, leave the country that I've ever had in my adult life, or in my entire life. And I'm going to Mexico City, and partly because, as I've talked about before, one of the things I've been long term thinking about and working on is where I could move that might be better for me. And I know that telling this story at this point, Mexico City is highly gentrified. There's a lot of backlash. It had not gotten there yet. I think probably I was at that point hearing whatever other people were hearing that ended up attracting them. I think the pandemic was really a turning point because a lot of people took the opportunity with their jobs going remote to move away and try different places and try out digital nomad life, which that was not a possibility for me, unfortunately. Actually, not unfortunately, the pandemic was really not the time to be like traveling internationally and mixing it up. So at the beginning of 2020, in February, I decided I wanted to visit Mexico City. And partly because, my interest in Mexico at that point, and it was not specific to Mexico City. I had never been to Mexico despite having grown up in Southern California, and it's right there. And I was curious, obviously. And when I started to think about moving out of the country, I just didn't have any idea of any of the details of doing something like that. And so one of the things that made Mexico appealing was that it was so close that it almost felt like a move just to another state. It's obviously more complicated than that in terms of bureaucracy, but just in terms of logistics, a big move is already overwhelming. And if you can keep it as short a distance as possible somehow, that is somewhat appealing. So I started thinking about where that might be. People recommended to me other cities in Mexico as well that I did look into, but never had the opportunity to visit. But I was planning a trip to Mexico City, and it was really lovely. I felt a few things, like a few good lessons for me. I had started working on learning Spanish using Duolingo several months before I was leaving. I don't think that I probably was doing enough work on it. I am not impressed with Duolingo anymore. I've used it now at the beginning phases of learning 2 languages, and I'm just not that impressed with it. I've used a lot of other apps, and I will maybe do a whole section on language apps and language learning. So one of the things that was unfortunate is that once I got there, having had no actual conversation practice in Spanish, I was really, really shy to even try to speak. And I was so nervous that you kind of freeze up. And the only things that I was really able to remember is that at the very least, I always first said in Spanish, which now I can't. This is the crazy thing. I started to learn Italian and I can't remember Spanish anymore. But I at least remembered to say in Spanish first, "Excuse me, do you speak English?" instead of just speaking in English to people. So that was like one of my achievements. And then obviously I used the translation app frequently. So visited Mexico City in February of 2020, and it was really lovely. I still feel like I only got to see at least only half of what there was that I wanted to see. That trip was amazing, not only for the experience of being there itself, but also because after working so hard for so long and feeling that my life was so limited by the circumstances I was in and the circumstances I put myself in, it helped me remember that there are more things I can do with my life. And after I came back from that, I actually was spending a lot of time thinking about how I wanted to make my life in Los Angeles more interesting, more enjoyable, more worthwhile. Now that I felt like I was in a slightly more comfortable position. And it is very funny that the next few weeks after I came back from Mexico City, I really made an effort to be a little bit more of a tourist in my own city and to look for activities and events and possibly some more classes. I had just a few months before that, I had taken an art class, and I was like, as long as I'm here, let me see what I can do for myself. And then one day I went to work and I had an appointment with one of my regular clients who I saw all the time. And she came in and she was on the phone with a friend of hers. And she was saying to him, so you're just going to go to the grocery store right now and you're going to buy like 2 weeks worth of food and you're going to lock yourself in your apartment? And he was like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I am overhearing this and I am just thinking he's eccentric, or he's working on a project, or something is happening. It's very specific to him. I didn't know what was going on. And she gets off the phone and she was like, this is crazy. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she explains that he had heard that there was some virus going around and it was very serious. And so he was just not going to leave the house for 2 weeks. And I was like, what is happening? And apparently, she tells me, like, this is on the news. I don't know how you haven't heard about this or something. So I get her set up and I look at the news, and as I'm going through it and reading the stories, which I obviously can't remember details of what I saw that day now, but I started to understand very quickly and very clearly the severity of the situation. And I knew that on the one hand, even though I had just finally had a vacation and finally was thinking about how can I actually live my life more fully now that things are kind of going okay for me, like things are sort of stable. I'm not amazingly wealthy. I'm barely comfortable, but I think that I have to start to incorporate more in my life or I'm not going to ever get to do anything. So I had just started to consider all of this, and I'm reading this news that's saying, like, this virus is going around, it's highly contagious, it's deadly, and everyone really should be very careful. And I'm like, how am I supposed to navigate this? But by the end of the day, I was still checking and reading updates in the news and thinking to myself, I feel like I can't go to work right now. Like, I feel like I could easily be a person to be spreading things from one person to the next because I work so closely with people, like physically in close contact with them. So I go home and I don't remember everything that happened, but I'm thinking about this and I think I should probably also take a couple of weeks off, even though I just got back from vacation and I don't have any money. So I post something to social media and I send out an email to my client. I'm thinking, like everyone else is, we're going to stay inside for a couple of weeks. It's going to get squashed down. We're going to be okay. We're going to go back to work. I think it was 2 or 3 days later, Gavin Newsom announces that everything shuts down and that's it. And I think everyone remembers everything that happened after that. It's super surreal. You wake up in the morning and you're like, why am I not going to work? Why did my alarm clock not go off? What is happening? And you have to kind of remind yourself of the whole story every day. And it was so weird. And the first few weeks, honestly, I just took a lot of naps and I realized how tired I was. And I tried to enjoy it because I was like, I have been working my entire life, adult life, at least one job, if not 2 jobs, if not 1 job and going to school as well, if not 2 jobs and going to school as well. I have not ever had a time, aside from the brief couple of months of unemployment, the first half of which I was sick, between my old job and going to school. So I am kind of okay with staying home for a couple of weeks. Actually, no, I'm great with staying home for a couple of weeks. I'm delighted. And as it goes on, I was really fortunate that it all worked out really easily for me, which I know was not the case for a lot of people. I know a lot of people struggled to get the benefits that they were entitled to. And that it was very, very difficult, like bureaucratic nightmare during that time. I felt very lucky for that. I had some other really bad luck, which is very unfortunate, which I may get to later. But initially, the beginning part of the pandemic went pretty smoothly for me. I never got sick. No one close to me got sick or died, thank God. And so it was stressful and it was worrisome all the time. But at least I didn't have like family in the hospital with COVID, or at least I didn't have COVID. At some point, after the first couple of months where I just thought like, oh, I'm just going to have a little bit of time off and I'm going to go back to work, I started to realize that there was no real end in sight. That's where I'll leave you this week. Thank you for watching. Please like the video, subscribe, follow, share, save, whatever, comment. And I will see you again. I post every Sunday is a new part of the story. And sometimes I post extra bits in between that are not necessarily parts of the story, but just thoughts that align with the story. And soon I'm going to be posting some process videos of my design work. So look for those. Okay, thanks. Bye.